There was a time long ago when the sun drew very near the earth. Soon plants began to wither and die. Streams began to dry up, and all the creatures on our Mother Earth began to fear death from hunger and thirst. The animals held a council to decide how to put the sun back in the sky where it belonged. A volunteer was sought to accomplish this task. The possum was the first animal to volunteer. Now at this time, the possum had a bushy tail like the fox. So the possum wrapped his long bushy tail around the sun and began to pull the sun back into the sky. But the sun burned all the fur off the possum's tail. So he released the sun and did not succeed. And so, the possum has a long hairless tail to this day. The fox was next to volunteer to move the sun back into the sky. He put the sun in his mouth and began to carry it back where it belonged. But the sun began to burn the fox's mouth, so he dropped the sun and did not succeed. As he returned to the earth, the sun also burned the tip of his bushy tail. And so it is that the fox has a blackened mouth and lips, and the tip of his tail is blackened to this day. The animals did not know what to do. Twice they had failed to put the sun back into the sky, and so they once more began to seek a volunteer. Now, at this time, there was a beautiful bird who was widely respected, for he soared high above all other birds, carrying messages to the Creator. His beauty and nobility were known throughout all of creation. He was next to volunteer. So he flew up and placed his head against the sun and began to flap his mighty wings to push the sun back into the sky. As he pushed, the sun burned the feathers off his head and charred his beautiful plumage. Yet the bird pushed onward, soaring higher and higher, until the sun was returned to where it belonged. When the noble bird returned to the earth, its beautiful head was featherless and red from being burned by the sun, and its beautiful feathers were charred black. The other animals could not look on their savior, for he was now frightful to behold. So it is that the turkey buzzard is now a solitary creature. You will not see the turkey buzzard with any other living animal, for they cannot look on him. But if you are fortunate enough to see the underside of his feathers, you will see the beautiful plumage that he once wore, where the sun was not able to char. And this is why the Lenape people regard this bird highly, for he gave greatly of himself to save all of creation.
On warm summer days, along the edge of the road or open countryside, if you glance skyward, you may see a dark silhouette floating effortlessly in the breeze. A graceful flyer, barely flapping its wings, it may seem to wobble at times. Higher and higher it goes until it's so high up it's out of sight. You might wonder what type of bird this is. Perhaps it's a hawk or maybe an eagle. But it's neither. It's a turkey vulture, so called because of its resemblance to wild turkeys. Often underappreciated and misunderstood, the turkey vulture is one of over 20 species of vultures in the world, and they play an important role in our ecosystem. On the shores of Lake Michigan, at the Schlitz Audubon Nature Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, raptor manager Lindsay Obermeyer knows a thing or two about vultures.
In North America, we have 3 species of vultures. In Wisconsin, we have turkey vultures. And in other areas, we have black vultures. They're found primarily in the south and southeast. And then we have California condors, the beautiful condors. Mm-hmm.
More closely related to storks and herons, vultures are actually considered birds of prey.
They are not necessarily considered raptors. Biologists right now are flip-flopping for where they actually belong, but they're in the bird of prey realm in the sense that they eat other animals.
The turkey vulture feeds almost exclusively on carrion and, unlike most birds, has a highly developed sense of smell.
There used to be an understanding that birds couldn't smell, and so more science and research has shown that birds do actually have the sense of smell, and it varies among species. And so with the vultures, they actually have some of the best senses of smell, maybe even among all animals in the animal kingdom. Turkey vultures have a preferent nostril, which is this hole on top of, on their face that goes straight through. And with that, they can actually smell things, rotting flesh, from over a mile away. And because they have this open nostril, they can actually pinpoint the direction where it's coming from.
They use that sense of smell to find carcasses, even under the cover of vegetation. And because turkey vultures are a major consumer of carrion, and they have a remarkably high tolerance for microbial toxins, they play an important ecological role in disposing of carcasses that could otherwise breed disease.
Turkey vultures are extremely important for the health of our ecosystem. They, as scavengers, find this dead meat that has bacteria and viruses on it, and they take it out of the environment, they clean it up. They're nature's recyclers.
Even their scientific name, Cathartus aura, reflects their place in the ecosystem. Cathartus, from the Greek katharsis, means to purify or cleanse, and the Latin aureus means golden. So turkey vultures are golden purifiers.
So it keeps us healthy and it keeps wildlife healthy. They can break down almost any disease known to man, botulism, anthrax. They can consume that and break it down, and it doesn't harm them, and then it doesn't hurt anything out in the environment. A little known fact is if you park your car under a roosting group of turkey vultures, they'll poop on your car, and actually it peels the paint off of your car. That's how acidic it is.
The turkey vulture range stretches from southern Canada to South America. Birds in the north migrate to warmer climates during the winter months and come back north again to breed in the spring.
So our turkey vultures in Wisconsin are a full migratory species. They will show up here in the spring and they lay their eggs and raise their young here in Wisconsin. And then fall time, typically maybe September, October, maybe even into November, depending on our temperatures, they'll take to the skies and migrate all the way down to South America, which is an extremely long trip. So when they make these huge migrations, they'll ride the air. They'll use the air. They have these huge wings, and flapping is extremely energy expensive for their bodies. And so they will use the thermals as they're rising up and ride them like an elevator or an escalator all the way up. And their huge wings, it's a 6-foot wingspan, they can just glide for miles to the next one and ride it up. And so they can do that all the way down to South America. And when you see them rising up like that, a bunch of them, it's called a kettle. Looks like a kettle, coming up. And then they come back in the spring.
Unlike some other birds of prey, turkey vultures don't use trees for nesting.
Turkey vultures don't build the typical bird nests you would imagine. They do not use sticks or twigs or leaves and build a cup-like nest, but instead they will actually find areas that are relatively high up on cliffs or buildings, flat surfaces, and they make a scrape. And so with gravel or some substrate that's there, and they pretty much will just scrape down like just a little bit, and they'll just lay eggs and have their nest right on a flat surface. The turkey vultures are monogamous, and so the males and the females will help raise the eggs or the chicks together, and they will do that year after year, and they'll protect the nest well, together and defend it. Turkey vultures, actually, when they're first hatched and in the first couple years of their life, like the first 1 or 2 years, that face is actually black or gray. And then when they hit maturity at about 2 or 3 years of age, that's when they get that red face. And so it's just beautiful, beautiful red face. And they don't have a lot of feathers. All of our vulture species, they don't have feathers on their heads because think about what they're doing. They're sticking their heads into kind of gross stuff. If they had a lot of feathers, the feathers would hold on to that gross stuff. It's another thing to clean. So they've lost all of those feathers. Keeps them cleaner.
In a small city park in Wisconsin, nearby residents have a unique opportunity to observe these nature's recyclers up close and personal.
Actually, my husband told me about them. He used to come running through this park, and he told me about them. And we didn't really know what birds they were. We didn't know if they were hawks or what they were. And it was actually one day that I was coming through the park on my bike that I stopped to talk to somebody who was standing here admiring the birds and told me that they were turkey vultures. So from then on, I knew what they were, so I began to look them up and read up about them. So, but it's been a few years, and I look forward to them being here every summer.
After the breeding season, turkey vultures will form roosts of dozens up to 100 individuals. In late summer and early fall, the local birds use this patch of trees in the park as home base, coming back each night to roost and leaving early in the morning to go about their daily business.
So about the roosting behaviors of turkey vultures, they are gregarious. They are social. They'll hang out together. Oftentimes when you see large groups of animals spending their nesting time together, the overnight roosts, a lot of people think it's for protection. But for bigger birds like turkey vultures, it might not necessarily be for protection, but rather for learning and for communication. And so they will all roost typically in the same tree, the same area every single night because it's a safe location and relatively warm. And then there are different generations of birds within this flock. And so they call it a wake. A group of turkey vultures is called a wake. And then when they wake up in the morning and they warm themselves up and they're getting ready, the young can actually follow the older ones to where food is. And so they stay in these groups like this so that the young can actually learn from the older ones. What a lot of people often see them doing as well when the sun is coming up, they can wake up from these roosts, maybe go to a different location higher up, and they'll spread their wings out. And I don't know if you've seen that, but they can line up in huge areas, usually up in the sunlight. They spread their wings straight out. And what this is called is sunning. And there's a couple theories as to why they do this, what's the advantage of it. And one of them is to warm their bodies up, and which is really good. It'll help them with their flying. And the other one is that the UV from the sun will actually kill bacteria on their feathers. As these guys are scavengers, they are not necessarily eating the most in the most cleanly scenarios, and so they can get a little dirty. And so they take advantage of this opportunity by keeping themselves clean.
I usually come in the morning, somewhere between 6:30 and 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, before work, and that's the time that they're here, and so I want to be here when they are, and so they're usually roosting in the trees, often with their wings spread so that they can sun themselves and dry out, I think, the moisture from overnight, and then in the midday they're off in search of food, and then they're back here in the late afternoon. And so, for people that really want to see the vultures, you have to be here at the right time of day, or else they're just not here. But if you wait them out, they'll be back in the afternoon. I bike along on this path, and I don't normally see them in any other trees other than these particular trees here. And I've always wondered what it is about these particular trees that makes such a wonderful place for them, what draws them here. But it's certainly something, because I don't see them, at the other end of the park, on either extreme end of the park. They're here, and so they seem to love this spot, and they come back every year. I like to think it's the same birds. but they grace this part of Wisconsin every summer by about mid-July, and they stay until end of October, sometime in November, till they decide to move on, and we're just lucky to have them.
At the Schlitz Audubon Nature Center, visitors have a chance to meet Tallulah.
So Tallulah is our resident turkey vulture here at Schlitz Audubon Nature Center. She's been with us a majority of her life. She's about 15 years old. She definitely teaches everybody that bald is beautiful. She's a little dusty. So we'll come in and say hi. The reason she is in captivity is because she would not survive out in the wild. She is what we call imprinted. And what this means is that it's really horrible for birds. When they're extremely young and their eyesight is developing, if they see a mom and dad turkey vulture feeding them, they associate and connect with that, and they think that's what I am, and then they learn from that. If there is a human around and feeding them and doing stuff, they associate with the human. We as humans cannot teach a turkey vulture how to be a turkey vulture. We don't know how to vocalize, we don't know how to hold, we don't look like turkey vultures. And once this period of understanding closes, it's permanent on a bird. So they can't survive out in the wild that way. So Tallulah is imprinted, and she was at a different facility for a number of years and then came to join us when she was about 8 years old. I was saying before how turkey vultures are not currently in that realm of raptor. They're like just outside of it. They're birds of prey. But raptors are classified because of their strong feet and their talons, and they use that. That's their tool for getting their food. A vulture's main tool is actually its beak. Their feet are very weak. Their talons aren't long and sharp and pointy, so they actually use their feet and these elongated toes to brace themselves on the prey. And the beak, which is it's razor sharp, is that sharp because it has to cut through the hides that potentially are out there for a long time, and they can get really tough. So when she eats this, you'll actually see she'll use her feet to brace on it, and then use her beak to kind of tear it all up. But she doesn't have those strong, powerful feet like a bald eagle does. And then interestingly as well, vultures are known as scavengers and meat eaters. But people have actually realized by studying them more that up to 50% of their diet is actually vegetation. So they'll hang out like around shorelines and landfills, and they will consume vegetation.
Remarkably, sometimes when I go through here, other people pay no attention to them. They seem to be rather oblivious, which is remarkable to me, because if I'm on my bike and I see them, I almost always want to get off my bike and stop and watch them for a while. So I find it rather strange and puzzling that people don't appreciate their beauty.
A lot of times people look at these birds and they just think, oh, they're just these big black, brown, gross birds. But if you look closely at them, their feathers are actually like iridescent. They have these golds and blues and greens. They are absolutely beautiful birds.
Seeing them in flight is so magnificent, the way they glide, that it's almost, this sounds, maybe this would be strange to some people, but coming through this part of the park and seeing these birds in flight, it's almost spiritual. It's almost a sacred space, to be here, to share this space with these beautiful birds, and to see them in flight. They're just so magnificent that it's hard not to be in awe of them.